you write about the value of citizenship and sort of the rarity in human history of actually being a citizen in a society where you can help dictate what the outcomes are in that society. Can you just talk basically just about what it means to be a citizen of a country and how fragile you think that is?
Yes, it's a very rare idea, and it came very late in civilizational history, not till 2,500 years ago. For the first 5,000 years of civilization, and for most of civilization since, residents have been either subjects, or they've been serfs, or they've been in some time indentured of some say, or slaves. But the idea that a citizen is a resident of a particular place that has borders and a unique traditions, customs, and then the citizens themselves, they do what? They elect their own officials, they audit them, they censor them, they can drive them out of office, recall them. They have a constitutional blueprint of laws that transcend the moment. And most importantly, they are in control of the executive, even if they don't specifically say that in a tripartite fashion, but the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of government. And they determine revenues and expenditures. But the most important thing is that officials serve at their pleasure and not vice versa. And that started in Greece around 700. And oddly enough, it was the idea that when people had olives and vines and they had a lot of investment in them, they were not able, under prior regimes, to pass that on to their children. So that was the idea to protect your property and through inheritance, and that the law would transcend a particular ruler or tyrant or king. And so it was the idea that individuals had rights to their property, and then from that it expanded into what we see now. But even today, there's 190 nations in the world, and less than 90 of them are constitutional. And when you look at the 90 that are called Democratic or Republican, they're not really. It's about 30 or 40, I think.
And what typically leads to the end of a democracy? When you look back at history and you look at countries that had citizens and then they become tyrannical, what are the conditions for that?
Aristotle has a whole discussion of that very question in the Politics, but it was this paradox that if you have the people, the majority of the people are middle class, that was the ideal in the ancient world, and they vote on where to get the money and who is to receive it from government, then naturally they will vote to tax other people than themselves and to get government to give them higher subsidies. And that would continue until is that conservative cliche, we're going to run out of Margaret Thatcher's until it runs out of somebody else's money. But you see it in the ancient world where gold's or silver coinage will be bronzed over, and they'll call them silver heads because the head of the coin that sticks out will rub off, and you'll see that it's not, that the silver is very thin, or vice versa. They call them red heads, where they're really bronze coins with gold veneers. But the idea is that eventually people will not spend money on defense, on national security, but on entitlements. And it's their choice to do so. They're the majority. And so there's this sort of warning about. The other thing very quickly is that with the onset of the Industrial Revolution, there was a whole pessimistic strain in Western Civ that if you give people so much money and so much leisure, then you create, and the Romans talked about luxus or decadence or luxury. That's
right.
And that we're all not going to get up in the morning and go to work because the system is so affluent that we don't have to, or we can navigate around getting to work. Or our appetites control us. This is a modern phenomenon, but it was a big issue in the early Roman Empire that people, with all of these arrays of choices of material acquisition or longer life or sensuality, that market capitalism and freedom gives you under a constitution, that they become enslaved by their appetites. They don't get married. They don't have children.
Yes.
They have a what Tocqueville said was prolonged adolescence, sort of a life of Julia or a pajama boy existence.